There is a garage in Level Cross, North Carolina, that has never been open to the public. There was no offer, not for money, not for a documentary, and not even for the most serious collectors who flew in just to make an offer. Each and every one of them has been turned down by Richard D. There are between 15 and 20 race cars buried on top of each other in that garage. They haven't been touched in decades. And the garage also has artifacts that no museum has ever been allowed to show. It's not important to know how much those things are worth. How come the most famous NASCAR driver has chosen to keep all of this a secret? What does that say about the man behind the legend? The number that tells you why any of this is important. You need to know how big Richard Petty's accomplishments were before you can understand what's in that garage, because those things in the garage would just be old cars and dusty prizes without that background. When they have it, they change into something else. 200. Over the course of his career, from 1958 to 1992, Richard Petty won that many NASCAR Cup Series races. With 105, David Pearson is the next driver in history to come close to that number. Petty has almost twice as many wins as the second most successful driver in history. 123 pole positions, 513 straight starts from 1971 to 1989, and a total of 1,184 starts over 35 years. 7 Cup Series titles, 7 Daytona 500 wins, and 123 pole positions. These aren't old records that have been worn down over time. They are so far above and beyond what anyone else has done that the sport has stopped seeing them as goals and started seeing them as permanent parts of the scenery. No one is going to move, just like a rock. His father Lee started the family racing team Petty Enterprises in Level Cross in 1949. It went on to become the most decorated business in NASCAR history. Before Richard took over the number 43 car, Lee Petty won 3 crowns of his own. Richard Petty's brother Maurice designed the engines that powered most of those 200 wins. A cousin of theirs, Dale Inman, was Richard's crew chief for most of his work. In the NASCAR Hall of Fame are 4 people from the same family who live in a small town in North Carolina. All of this happened on a compound in Level Cross. The cars were built, tuned, and sent out to win the sport for 40 years. The compound is still there, but the garage in the middle of it hasn't been fully open to the public in years. What it really means when 15 race cars are buried. Many times, Richard Petty has said that when he was racing, he didn't really think about restoring old cars. A used race car was just a used race car in the 1960 seconds and 1970 seconds. Teams had to get money to build the next one. So they sold cars to smaller teams, took them apart for parts, or just left them behind. Petty has said that he sold some of his cars to drivers on the West Coast for whatever he could get. At the time, no one thought that a broken-down stock car would one day be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He said that no one thought to try to save them. That's why they didn't. These were the ones that didn't sell because they were too broken or tangled up with other things to move. They were stacked behind the garage in Level Cross. Petty thinks there are 15 to 20 cars in that pile. Not shown, fixed up, or labeled. Just stacked on top of each other in a field next to the garage, exposed to the weather in North Carolina for decades. It's hard to figure out what those cars mean in terms of race history. When it comes to mist protection, they stand for something Petty has talked about in public in a way that most legends don't. He knows what was lost. That's what he said. The cars that were kept in the garage, for different reasons, are the ones that are still there. It wasn't because of how much they might be worth on the market. It was because of what they meant to the people who drove and built them. This is important to know because a car kept for its auction value is an asset that can be used to make money. It's not like the money was ever connected to the car that was kept because of what happened in it on a certain afternoon at a certain track. The second kind is all over the building in Level Cross. The Plymouth Superbird was the first car that made a big splash. There are 2 cars in that garage that represent 2 different stages of Richard Petty's career. Together, they tell the whole story better than any prize wall could. The Plymouth Superbird is the first one. The Superbird was built in 1970 to get around NASCAR's rules about making changes to aerodynamics. It was only meant to go faster than everything else on an oval track. Its unique, pointy nose cone and huge rear wing were not choices made for looks. Chrysler's racing section made those engineering choices to lower drag and boost downforce at speeds close to 200 miles per hour. During the 1970 season, Petty won 18 races in Plymouth cars. The Superbird became forever linked with his number 43 in a way that no other car in his career could match. The one that is in the Level Cross building has not been fixed up. It's not clean enough to show off. There are still pieces of tire on the undercarriage. The bodywork shows signs of racing contact from decades ago that was never fixed because the car was never meant to be a showpiece. A similar Superbird in the same shape as Petty Providence would be one of the most important pieces of American motorsport history you can find. It's not been made public anywhere. The second car is older and not as flashy, but it's more important in some ways. Lee Petty and his sons built the 1957 Oldsmobile by hand in their Level Cross home garage. It's also the car that Richard Petty drove in his first NASCAR race. It was crude in every way and rusted like steel does when it is kept for what it means instead of what it's worth. The Superbird was the best thing that Petty ever did. The Oldsmobile stands for the time before everything else. When he was 20, a young man from a small town in North Carolina aimed a car at a racecourse and saw what he was made of. They are both in the same garage. Neither one is for sale. The back room that almost no one has been in. There is a smaller room in the back of the main garage, past the cars, tools, and stacked race gear that has been there for decades. In interviews over the years, people who used to work at Petty Enterprises have talked about it. It's not on any tour routes. There is no mention of it in any official museum papers. People who know about it often say that it's a place where private things that shouldn't be seen by the public were put away quietly. It is said that there is more in that room than just cars and prizes. Many of the fan letters from the 960 seconds and 1019 and 70 seconds have never been opened. They were kept not because Petty planned to answer them, but because he would never throw them away. Children, veterans, and other people who felt moved to write and send to a stranger in North Carolina after watching him run because it made them think of something in their own lives. He kept them. Also, there are things that belong to Dale Earnhardt Sr., who died on the last lap of the 2001 Daytona 500 at Daytona International Speedway. When they were racing, Petty and Earnhardt were always going against each other. There was a deep respect between the two drivers, despite having very different personalities and driving styles. This respect went beyond most of what is said in public sports spaces. The things that Petty has kept from that relationship are kept in the back room. People who have seen it say the objects aren't gifts, but rather the kind of things you hold on to when someone you knew better than most people suddenly disappears. The frame of the car from Petty's worst crash is also said to be there. In 1980 at Pocono Raceway, his car went through a crash that has ended careers and even killed people in racing. It went through the air, barrel rolled several times, and finally came to a stop. Petty got up and left. The frame was kept the way it was when it was taken out of the wreckage. It's not nice and clean or straight. It's still in the same shape it was in when the relief crew was done with it. He has never told anyone in public why he kept it. The people who have seen it say that the explanation is clear as soon as you look at it. I completely understand, Nicholas. Each of the last 3 parts now has 250 words of new, checked specific information added to them. Don't write the same thing twice on the same page. Not any padding. Here are the 3 expanded parts that can be used on their own as drop-in replacements. The offers he turned down and how much it cost him to do so. Since almost none of the things in that garage have ever been for sale, it's really hard to give an accurate idea of their value. Some people who have looked at parts of the collection say that the total value of the cars, the memorabilia, the handwritten pit notes and setup logs from championship seasons, the used race gear, and the personal items could reach $10 million or more, depending on how the market is doing at the time of any possible sale. Petty has been offered things. Private buyers have gotten in touch with him. A number of institutions have expressed interest in buying parts of the collection to use in changing exhibitions. All of those talks have not led to anything. He's turned down every good offer. Not because he doesn't think the offer is worth what it is, but because that's not the point. Things in that garage were not put there as assets. They were kept because giving them up would have been like giving up something that couldn't be replaced. The fact that Petty Enterprises was under a lot of financial pressure in its last few years makes those refusals even more shocking. The team had been the best in NASCAR for decades, but things got tough in the late 1990s and early 2000s as the sport became more expensive and helped the business. Petty got outside money to help and tried a few different ways to restructure it before deciding to call it Petty's Garage in 2008, putting all of their attention on making custom cars and fixing up old ones. During those tough years, the things in that private garage were Petty's only source of income, and he never touched them. It was clear to collectors and sale houses what was inside. During the tough years, offers came in because it seemed more likely that they would be accepted. He also said no to those. The shop in Level Cross wasn't a way to make money. No matter what the balance sheet showed, it was never going to become one. The public-facing part of the family's history is taken care of by the Petty Museum, which was started by his late wife Linda in 1988 and moved back to the Level Cross compound in 2014 after a time in nearby Randleman. People can look at championship cars, trophies, uniforms, and racing gear that has been carefully set up to be shown. People who are interested in NASCAR history should go to the museum because it is very thorough and important. For sure, it's not the same as the private garage either. What Richard Petty was willing to give to the museum is there. What he wasn't is in the garage. Where the real story lives is in the difference between those two groups. While Kyle Petty and Adam were gone, almost everything changed. People have asked Rid Petty many times over the years why he doesn't share so much of his past with the fans who helped him become famous. His answer has always been the same. There are some things that shouldn't be done in groups. Therefore, the people who were there. Richard Petty's son Kyle drove professionally for more than 20 years, becoming the 3rd generation in the family to be involved in motorsports. He has been in the garage. He doesn't record it or talk about it in public in great depth. The grandson of Petty, Theed Moffitt, who races in the truck series, has also been inside. The family uses the garage in the same way that some rooms in some homes are used. as a place to store and sometimes review the weight of shared history without having to explain it to anyone outside the family. Even Kyle Petty has had a hard time dealing with the weight of the family name. During his entire professional career, he always had to compete with his father, Richard. He won 8 Cup Series races over the course of 18 years, which would be a good career for most drivers, but it was always compared to Richard's 200. He has been open about what it was like to grow up as the son of the most powerful driver in the history of the sport's statistics, and how the garage and level cross meant different things to him than it did to the fans and collectors who wanted to get into it. It was history, to them. It was home to Kyle. The tools on the walls were the ones he saw his uncle Maurice and his dad use when he was the kid. The cars were not forgotten relics from a better time. It was the building where he learned to work on engines that he saw the cars being built when he was a child. Adam Petty died in May 2000 during a practice session at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. This made everyone in that garage feel different emotions. Adam was 20 years old and already racing professionally. He was Kyle's son and Richard's grandson. Adam was the 4th generation of Pettys to race in NASCAR. He died when the throttle got stuck and his fast-moving car hit the wall outside. And he died before most of the people who would have watched him race knew who he was. He was the first professional athlete from his family to play any American sport. Kyle Petty said that losing Adam changed the way he thought about the family tradition and why it was important to keep it safe. Richard Petty has talked about Adam's death with the care of someone who picks each word carefully, because none of them are quite enough. After 2000, the level cross garage changed into something else. Before that, the things inside were already personal. When Petty lost Adam, the thought of letting businesses or the public use that area for displays became something he was not interested in considering. The family hangs out in the garage. Lee Petty's tools are still hanging on the same hooks he left them. There is the frame of a crashed car to remind people that at those speeds, survival was never a sure thing and should never have been taken for granted. Most people drive by this quiet building in a small North Carolina town without stopping to see what's inside. It's where 4 generations of one family's relationship with a sport that asked them to do everything is kept. In 2024, Richard Petty turned 86 years old. Still, he shows up at the Level Cross Group. The dark sunglasses and cowboy hat that he wears now have been a part of American racing for 40 years. Fans who go to North Carolina can still get his autograph. Everyone who has met him in that situation has said the same thing about him. He is exactly what he seems to be. Really friendly, really present, and really interested in the people who came to find him. Petty's Garage, the custom car and restoration shop that took over from Petty Enterprises as the main business of the Level Cross compound in 2008, still works on cars for people who want the high level of craftsmanship that the Petty name stands for. Dale Evans and Maurice Petty Inman, who are both in their 80s, helped rebuild the 1964 Plymouth Belvedere Championship car that the shop finished a few years ago. They did this by using the original plans and their own memories of how the cars were put together. 3 members of the NASCAR Hall of Fame worked on that project together in the same building where the first cars were built 60 years before. They did the same work with the same level of care. None of them did it out of a sense of nostalgia. It was craft that was done in that building with the same care it had always been done with. The garage in Level Cross ultimately stands for more than the monetary value of its contents or the personal history that each item in it holds. It also stands for a specific argument about what legacy really means. In American sports, most of what is called legacy is open to the public. There are halls of fame, record books, highlight packages, and memorial goods that hold it. It is meant to be read by people who weren't there. Richard Petty had the best statistical career in the history of his sport. When he got home, he leveled his car, put the things that were most important to him in a building, and locked the door. Not to hide them or keep their value high, but because some of the things it takes to do what he did are not for sale and never will be. He knew that for sure because he did something about it for almost 60 years. If Richard Petty ever lets the world into his garage, it will change how we think about how much it really costs to become the best NASCAR driver ever. Click the like button, leave a comment, and follow for more untold Hollywood stories. Don't forget to hit the bell button to make sure you never miss a video. Need more? Watch one of our other movies. Thanks for seeing.